There's some more people coming in.
Big meeting today.
Yeah. All right. So we have a quorum. It's 10 a.m. I will call to order this meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. For this meeting, the committee is convening via video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use a full name or acts inappropriately. Also, if you are a member of the public and wish to speak, you can use the chat to send a message to me or to Vince, letting us know that you are wanting to make a comment. You don't need to put the comment itself in the chat. We do not have a raise hand feature in this format. I am Mary Longacre, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. It's February 9th today. To get started, I'll confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Gary Beller. Gary, you're muted.
Present.
Thank you. Sarah Boyce.
Present.
Peter Brace.
Present.
Graham Durovich.
Present.
Matt Fee.
Here.
Ian Golding.
Here.
Jennifer Cartberg.
Here.
Fritz McClure.
Here.
Thank you all. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Vince Murphy.
Here.
Holly Backus.
Present.
And do we see anybody else from the town? I don't see anyone, Vince. Okay. We do not have speakers scheduled on the agenda, I believe, so good morning to everyone. This open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. Time permitting, this meeting will feature public comment. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care not to share your screen. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Before we move to the first item on the agenda, I will cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Additionally, comments can be sent in advance or after a meeting to Vince Murphy, vmurphy@nantucket-ma.gov if you're unable to appear at a meeting. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. All right, turning to the agenda. We have some announcements. Briefly, Resilient Nantucket Designs for Adaptation, as shown in the agenda, has some upcoming meetings, the next one being Friday, February 12th. If members of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee are attending public events, we remind you that we need to get an idea of whether or not we'll have a quorum, so that if we do, we will need to post an agenda in order to comply with open meeting law. I believe at our last meeting, we determined that we did not expect a quorum on February 12th. Just get a quick show of hands for people who might be attending that meeting. Yeah, not seeing any. I'm not concerned about that. Also, the Envision Resilience Nantucket Challenge announced a
Mary?
speaker series. Yes, I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt for
Yep.
1 second. Holly asked me to give an update. I made an error when I was putting part of this agenda in. On the forum on April 23rd and 24th is the final presentation of all of the elements of Resilient Nantucket, not just the toolkit. And is that correct, Holly, or do you have anything to add?
That is correct. It's actually going to be a final forum with presenters actually from all over the world for resiliency. Great speakers that our consultants are putting together. So I would highly recommend keeping that on your radar. We would love to have everybody. So yes, as well as this Friday's meeting with the HDC is actually going over the draft design guidelines. So that will be interesting. They will be posted on the town's website for the public to review prior to.
Okay, so again, I think the best thing to do for committee members, if you change your mind and are attending February 12th, send Vince an email letting him know that, and he can track whether or not we might have a quorum. Thank you. All right, the Envision Resilience Nantucket Challenge announced a speaker series. Those are not live events. They are recordings that are available on the website. I was able to watch the first 2 recordings and thought they were very well done. I learned some things from them. I'll also mention that there is a list of resources for sea level rise and resilience available on the Envision Resilience website. I don't know if anybody else has comments on that. Also Acclimate maintains an event calendar. There's a link in our agenda to help people keep track of upcoming events from various sources that might be related to coastal resilience. Finally, not mentioned on the agenda, but there is a select board meeting tomorrow. Again, can I get a show of hands to see if any of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee members will be attending that meeting? So we have Gary, Peter, me, anybody else? All right, so I'm not seeing the hands. Matt obviously would be there as a member of the select board. That's 4. Vince, should we post that? As a precaution, what's the right thing to do there? If we have 4, if one other person decides to show up.
Unfortunately, it's too soon beforehand. It has to be posted 48 hours beforehand, given that it's just a little under 24 now, probably around 30 hours, 35 hours, something like that. It's just too soon. There's no
Okay,
point.
so
yeah.
So committee members be advised of that restriction.
Mary, people
Matt?
can attend. We just can't operate. You can't operate as the CROC committee. You can all
Yeah.
be sitting in the audience and just don't talk to each other. Just don't act as a committee.
Understood. All right, the next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes from January 26th. Those were sent out by Vince. Did anybody have comments or corrections for the minutes? Okay, not seeing anybody there.
Move approval.
Thank you, Matt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so Vince has popped those up on the screen. Vince, since we have no corrections other than the addition of the link to the recordings, can we take that down so that I can see everybody as I do the roll call vote? Thank you. So we have a motion made and seconded to approve. Gary Beller.
Aye.
Sarah Boyce.
Aye.
Peter Brace. Peter, you're muted. Still muted, Peter. Any luck getting unmuted, Peter?
Aye.
Thank you. Graham Durovich.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Ian Golding.
Abstain. I wasn't present.
Thank you, Ian. Jen Carberg.
Aye.
Fritz McClure.
Aye.
And Mary Longacre, aye. So it's 8-4 with 1 abstention from Ian Golding. Next item on our agenda is a report on Winter Storm Orlena, which was February 1st and 2nd. Flooding and erosion effects were observed around the island. Reminder to everybody before we proceed that you must use your full name in Zoom. If you are unable to change that yourself, send Vince Murphy a chat with your name and what needs to be changed, and he might be able to accommodate you. You will not be allowed to comment without the full name. And a reminder also to mute yourself if you are not speaking. Vince, when you're ready, please go ahead with the presentation on the storm.
Beg your pardon, I just had to send a super quick email to Peter Morrison with the link for this meeting. Okay, I must apologize in advance. I attempted to do my usual PowerPoint presentation. I think my PowerPoint is going on strike because it wouldn't work, and unfortunately I will be presenting this update in a Word document, and apologies on that. If anyone needs it, I'm sure I can share this afterwards as a PDF. So everyone knows there was a lovely winter storm Orlena hit the island Monday and Tuesday of last week, February 1st and 2nd. Can everyone see this okay? So,
yes.
Okay, thank you. So the highlight from the storm is that there was a minor amount of flooding, nothing that we'd see worse again this winter, I'm sure. The real highlight was the erosion. So I'm just going to very, very quickly skim over the flooding before I get onto the erosion. So Monday evening high tide, there wasn't really enough to justify closing Easy Street. There was no flooding anywhere else in the downtown area that was even comparable to this. Tuesday morning, Madaket Ditch and Madaket Harbour were quite full. But it never overtopped First or Second Bridge, and the worst I saw was at F Street by the pier, and part of the pier was submerged, but that was about as much as it was. You could still walk it in Wellington boots. Tuesday evening, there was more substantial flooding. There was also flooding at the high tide Tuesday morning at about 3:30 in the morning. I didn't get pictures of that, but this was just around high tide on Tuesday evening. It was comparable enough to this. The road was closed at this point to traffic, and was closed for I think about 4 hours. The storm gate was closed at Children's Beach at the boat access ramp. This was the flooding just about at the maximum. There was a minor amount of flow under the barrier, as there always is, and it was pretty much just going to a storm drain. This was perfectly passable. Down on Easton Street by there was a few properties just near the Coast Guard station where there was flow across the properties and a minor amount onto the pavement. It was going onto the street. It wasn't gathering on the street to any major extent. There was no real ponding. It was going to storm drains and draining away. I never saw it getting bad on Easton Street. The erosion was the fun bit. So everyone knows, I've sent emails around to CRAC members that Sheep Pond Road had a catastrophic incident, and I see there are some members from Sheep Pond Road on there on the meeting. If you wouldn't mind just letting me get to the end, and then if Mary is willing to entertain a question or two very quickly, that's up to that's the chair's prerogative. Monday evening at 4 o'clock, I was on Sheep Pond Road and I took this picture here. I had a permanent marker on the ground just about where the cursor is, back from the edge of the road, so that I could measure the distance from there to the edge of the bluff. I've been doing that for months. This night here, it was 10 feet, pretty much exactly 10 feet. That's 4 o'clock in the evening. The following morning, around 9 a.m., the road was gone. DPW were out putting barricades in place. Fire department were on scene as well, and they were trying to assess the situation. At this point, Sheep Pond Road residents were also after losing power. I went back Tuesday evening later in the day, and it had continued to erode all day. This was an active erosion zone all day long. big point to note is that the town is working to remedy this and try and find alternative access as quickly as possible for Sheep Pond Road residents. Jennifer Jordan or somebody else may be able to give an update, but as I understand it, I think it was Wednesday that the electricity was repaired by a subcontractor from National Grid. There's a handful of houses, mainly in the Madaket area, that are in jeopardy or in serious trouble. This is one of the ones that's approaching jeopardy, 45 Massachusetts Avenue. I took this Monday, and it lost more sand after this, but their deck is still sound, and there's still a small bit of a gap. It got back to about here. Their tight tank is still safe, or at least it was when I was there last. The big one was this one here, 35 Massachusetts Avenue. 35 Massachusetts Avenue. This is in the active tide line. This was Tuesday morning, and a little bit later, I got down to have a look at their tide tank, and it was exposed. This property is in serious trouble, and it's been assessed by Paul Murphy from the building department, and he's going to he's the proper authority to decide what will happen with that house. This is I know looking at the same house again, but this is a slightly different picture showing a different thing. This utility pole here and the guy wire that come down to support it were both exposed and in jeopardy. I ended up contacting Verizon and National Grid. National Grid responded, and they sent people out to assess it and look at what kind of threat it was and where it might be moved. I didn't get to check what they did with it just yet, but I did advise them that if it's not in the surf zone now, it will be in the extremely near future. So they're aware that something needs to be done to fix this situation. Tuesday morning, 9:45, I had a look at this house. It's number 33 New Hampshire. It had about 3 to 4 yards of bluff in front of their deck. Following morning, that bluff was gone. There was wash over onto it, and the deck had been undermined. There's still about, at the time, 10 feet before you get to the footings for the house. Moving further east, this is the end of Hummock Pond Road, the property that was moved, I believe it was September. 289 Hummock Pond Road. This is their original access road. This is an additional access that was put in. This is now in jeopardy. The house itself is on cribbing. It's approximately 13 to 14 yards from the edge of the bluff, and we're monitoring that one as well. The end of the sewer treatment plant, there's rods sticking out of the ground. This one's in the tide line. The last time I was there in early January, this one had only just been exposed, and it had crept back to about there through January, and then in this storm, it lost about 15 to 20 feet, bringing it back to here. Further out on the south shore, I got down to the beach at Fisherman's, and this is a kind of a pretty good example or overview for how much of the South Shore looked pretty much from Maya Comet going all the way to the airport and beyond. This is this is from Fisherman's Beach looking east towards Novadear and the airport. These dunes that usually gradually slope down have been eroded back and created a new bluff face. This is obviously a storm tide, so it did its job and it prevented excessive loss further inland, but at the same time, it does look pretty harsh. The dune did provide an effective barrier. Beaches change profile during the year. What's going to likely happen now is these will just slump down and gain that nice gentle forward slope. Sand will hopefully build back up, and hopefully by June or July this will have a more normal profile to it again, or at least it did a similar thing last year. That's about as much as I had. Did any other committee members wish to present or mention any erosion they saw? I'm going to stop sharing for now.
Just a reminder that everyone's on mute, so you'd have to unmute yourself to offer a comment. Committee members first. Ian, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to thank Vince for the photographs, which are very useful.
Peter?
Yeah, I want to say that as someone who covered this issue for 2 newspapers over 2 decades, this is really the first time that erosion on the South Shore has gotten so much play in the media. This has been going on for decades. So I don't know. I don't want the crack committee to hype it like this is brand new stuff that's happening. That's all.
Thank you, Peter. Other committee members with comments? Not seeing any. I also want to say thank you to Vince. I'm glad that we don't have to have everybody rush out to see what's going on. Peter, your point is taken. This is not a new issue, but I think that it does speak to the need for the coastal resilience plan. Erosion and flooding are not things that will happen in some far off future. They are happening now. That's all we can really say about it. Are there members of the public that wish to offer public comment on this topic right now? Again, you can send a chat message to me or to Vince to let us know. Or since I am calling for public comment, if you want to unmute yourself, please make sure your full name is displayed. And if you have a comment on this topic, we're welcome to take that. I'm not seeing anything, Vince. Just want to double check. Okay.
I'm cycling around. I don't see anyone.
All right, so the next item on our agenda is, sorry, let me look at the right page. Discussion of the January 28th virtual open house and any feedback from Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee members. So this was the Arcadis virtual open house for the Coastal Resilience Plan, which invited public participation. So some of the topics that I thought we could cover would be if there are opportunities to increase engagement. Vince can tell us how many people participated. Since there were breakout rooms with small groups, if anybody on the committee wanted to share their impressions from their breakout room. And also noting that the recording is available to be watched by the public, and there's a link in our agenda for that. Any comments from committee members? Fritz, please go ahead.
Yes, I sort of looked at who was there. I mean, it was a nice number of people present. I guess my overall impression was that we seem to have successfully engaged the people who want to be successfully engaged. My concern was I didn't, and I'm not going to say they weren't there. I'm just going to say I didn't notice any significant number of people or any people that I would necessarily say from the building trades industry or the real estate industry. And I think it's very important, we've mentioned this before, that we get them engaged in the discussion one way or the other, positive or negative, early, so that we simply don't cruise along and then at the end of the report begin to hear any feedback about didn't know about this, didn't know about that, and starting to, well, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Fritz. Peter?
So in response to what Fritz said, maybe we should specifically have an open house for the building trades and for the real estate community. Send them invites. Let them know we want your feedback. We want you to know what's going on. We don't want you to be surprised. Let's not wait for it to happen. Let's go right at them.
And not just that we don't want them to be surprised, but we want them to provide input into the plan. I mean, their constituency right. is certainly important. Thank you, Peter. I think that's an interesting idea to consider. Other comments from members of the committee? Right, I will add, I'm sorry, Jen and then Sarah, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, I know that the main portion of it was recorded, but the breakout rooms weren't. And I apologize if I missed this, but is there like a distillation of notes from the breakout rooms, or just pulling together what was discussed? I had to leave before the end of the breakout room sessions.
Vince, if you can answer that.
Sure thing. Thank you, Mary. Hi, Jen. So yeah, they weren't. So if you might remember, they used a thing called Google Boards to collect people's opinions and all and that kind of thing. So if you remember, they did a similar thing, except on paper and in person, for the hazard mitigation plan, and that was then included in the end of the HMP as kind of an appendix. I'm kind of hoping it'll find its way in that way. But I don't know for certain. The important thing is that in those breakout rooms, and everyone gave their opinion, and it was all distilled onto paper. That is kind of the foundation for how certain parts of the CRP will be driven. It's kind of largely the point of the night, and I'm delighted it was there. I'm sorry it wasn't able to be recorded too, but unfortunately it was just a tech problem as I understand it, or what was the other way it was put to me? They didn't have the right level of membership for Zoom. You have to buy another package in order to be able to record. I don't know enough about Zoom to say, but that was the gist I was given at one point.
And I think each breakout room group gave a report back to the General Assembly, and I think that part was recorded at the end of the meeting. So there is a summary record. Sarah, you also had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say generally for those who weren't able to attend that there were a lot. I was actually pretty impressed with the number of attendees overall. And, you know, I hear Fritz's point that there were a lot of people that weren't there, you know, or weren't represented. But as a first kind of go around, I was actually impressed with how many people were there. And I also really appreciated the breakout rooms. I don't know how everyone's rooms were, but there was a good cross representation within the breakout room I was in. It wasn't like, I mean, I knew the crack members were going to be distributed, but I also felt like there was a diversity of people within my group, and everybody's voices were heard. Everybody had a chance to talk. And so I think that just made me feel really good about the process and where we're going. One of the suggestions that came up in our group was the breakout session worked so well and was such a nice model of how it was done that we talked about the possibility of creating those as sort of meeting in a box sort of thing, so that maybe if there are people that were uncomfortable or unable to come to a large meeting like this, somebody could kind of bring those kind of meeting in a box, the smaller ones, to specific groups. So whether it's we do that for the building association, the realtors, or other community groups that maybe are underrepresented currently in the process. So I just think that there was a lot of discussion about who else to reach out to too. So I was really impressed with how that went.
Thank you, Sarah. Other comments from committee members?
Yeah, Matt.
Okay.
Yep,
Oh,
sorry.
Matt, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not getting great internet, so I turn my head off. So I'll turn my video back on. I think the breakouts were great. I think if we had something more to react to, the breakout groups would be even more effective. I think right now, and this reminds me of the hazard mitigation that we did too. What are our options for different areas? I think if we'd have better discussions. Our discussion in my group was wandering all around to plastic and global warming and other stuff that really weren't part of this. And we had a lot of good stuff too, but I just think if all of a sudden we were saying, well, here are our 3 choices in this area, here are our 4 choices, here are the costs, I think all of a sudden the discussions would be focused on resiliency, and rather in counting on us. I hope, I know they're not going to, but the answer isn't necessarily going to come from us. What we accept, what we are, back, and how we want to move forward is going to be a community decision. But what the options are, I don't think we have the sort of the knowledge and wherewithal to know that. So, so anyway, I'm very happy with how the meeting went. I'm very happy with the breakout groups. I think they'll work even better. And I agree with Peter that we need to bring a bit more of a cross section.
Okay, building on that, I was told that the meeting was announced in the public schools. I did not see, of course, I don't know, everyone's age, but I did not see any of the students present at the meeting. I do really appreciate that they announced it. And I hope that we will get participation from the younger group as well in the future. I also didn't see, and again, echoing what others have said, it's only slightly apparent looking at the names on the screen. I didn't see very many minority members of the community. And again, I would hope that we would be able to encourage them to participate in the process and include their views. Those are two of the groups that I would like to see in the future. Vince has a question.
Not a question, just an update. I don't have a date for this yet. There was always planned to be two, well, I guess they're going to be open houses as opposed to community charrettes. But Matt set me up nicely for this. There's going to be a second one where we do get to discuss methods and locations, or what Arcadis might think might work in certain locations in at some point in the early part of the summer. No date yet. It's likely to be June is all I know, but it could be late May, it could be early July. I don't know. So
thank you, Vince. And do you have a count on the number of attendees to share?
The maximum that were on screen at any one time was 167, and there was over 220 something registered. I don't know the maximum number of individual attendances, and I've been trying to find out, and I don't have it.
Okay. And I've heard from some people who said that they had registered and regretted something came up at the last minute and were not able to attend. So there was interest beyond the number who showed up. Any further comments on this topic? So I'm not seeing any. The next item on our agenda is a review of the draft homeowners brochure, which was created by the Education Subcommittee, which has since disbanded. Sarah, do you want to introduce this? And Vince, can you share it on the screen?
Sure. So just as a preamble, especially since we have a lot of additional people on the call today, the homeowners brochure was the kind of first thing and that the education subcommittee really focused on. And the first part, the cover that we're seeing right now on the screen, it's really meant to be a way to introduce the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee too, and the idea of coastal resiliency. So we, I have to say the committee worked on this well over a year ago, and we were at a decent draft before when COVID hit. So, and then, so like delayed a lot of things. So that's why this is just coming to you all now, even though we actually did the work of it about a year ago. So it's meant to, I know that there's a lot of educational and outreach tools that are going to come out of the plan. But when we were doing this a year ago, we were thinking we have to start to get some materials out, both to educate the community, but also to sort of introduce our committee. And so we thought, the beginning, the front, it's meant to be a threefold. So, the part that you're looking at right now on the screen, where it says improving coastal resilience at home, that's the cover. This is adopted from many publicly available things that are, and then it's sort of tailored to Nantucket specifically. But so it has, the what we're seeing as the list of resources, that would be the back cover when it's folded. And so it's just, as something that could be handed out, which now it seems silly to hand out things when we're during COVID, but it was meant to be something that we could hand out that is a useful tool, hopefully, for homeowners, but then also has some of our information on it as resources that people could go to get information about what the committee does, as well as protecting their homes. So it has like the FEMA protecting your homes guidelines, the resilientact.org, where all the coastal resiliency information is held, the sea level rise information, and the Mass Coastal Homeowners Preparedness Handbook, which is like the most comprehensive. So it has all that stuff in it. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, has Vince's contact. And then as you're seeing on the far left, which would, when you fold it, be sort of like the inside fold. It's just a discussion of in a very general and introductory sense, like what is coastal resilience? Like what are we going for? We're not solving everything and stopping everything. It's kind of looking at how we can prepare and adapt and then reduce impacts and try to be resilient. And so once again, we're not reinventing everything. We're just packaging it in a kind of simple way and clear to introduce people to the committee and further resources. So before we move on to the inside, I would like to hear if there's any comments or additional things from the other members of the education subcommittee on this portion.
Graham and I were the other members of the education subcommittee. Graham, do you have any comment?
I think you covered it, Sarah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, for introducing that so well. Any other members of the committee? I do see Holly has a hand up. Okay, Holly, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I think this is great. This is fantastic. I think even though we're doing COVID, you will be able to have it on the town's page and somebody could print it out and have it available at home. I was just curious on what, specifically, Sarah, what your thoughts would be to have some type of link to Resilient Nantucket, just because I think having the design guidelines, which we'll have obviously approved by the by June, just that's a key important aspect of being resilient and what the island, what specifically the town is doing to do that. So I think having homeowners being able to know that the efforts that everybody is doing is done cohesively. I'm just curious.
I think that would be totally appropriate. And I think when our initial drafts of this, that wasn't as far along yet to point to it. So there was a discussion with some of the links of like how in depth do we get, because we wanted it to be, like I said, clean. But I mean, my personal view, and I would love to hear if other committee members have different thoughts, but I think that it makes perfect sense for really where people in our community can go for those guidelines. Like I said, in some ways, this was meant to be both the introductory to the committee, but also a stopgap measure of sort of like our recommendation to the select board, right? Where we know all these other things are coming down the pipeline. Let's get something out now that can help introduce our committee to the community, but then also provide some basic, like, we know these things will at least help or help you start thinking about resilience. So I think we can definitely put that on the resources page. I think
I think that's an excellent suggestion. We should
Exactly.
figure out how to fit it on there. Let me just throw out, Florencia Rulo is the person who did the work to put all this on paper, and she's done a fantastic job, and we thank her very, very much for that.
Thank you, Mary. I'm sorry
yeah.
I neglected to mention
No,
that.
no. So I think, Sarah, you were looking for other comments on this page. Were there any from the committee members? Okay, so do we want to scroll to the second page, Sarah?
Sure, that would be great. Thanks. And thank you, Vince. So in moving forward with I'll just introduce this, what our set of goals were really to look at, flood damage. So obviously, not everyone lives on the coast where we're going to be necessarily immediately inundated by sea level rise and storm surge, but this is, can constitute lots of areas of flooding. And that's kind of maybe the number one thing a lot of homeowners are seeing in the more immediate sense. And so the color coding was meant to be, the red was resistance measures to keep water out. So sort of simple thing, or not, maybe not simple, but small things people can do to kind of protect and keep the water out. And then the resilience measures, which were meant to help minimize damage should water come in. And this is based on a few different things that we have taken from different resiliency measure publications, and we tailored it to Nantucket, and Florencia helps tailor it to be more in line with Nantucket, especially adding the Jeep in the garage. That was the most Nantucket-y thing that was added.
Comments. I hope that people were able to review this, because we're not really able to look at detail on the screen. At least I'm not. But are there comments from the committee members on the content or anything else on this inside page of the brochure? Jen? And I'm sorry, before we go to Jen, Graham, did you want to add anything here? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jen.
I think this looks really great. I really like all the information that's in here and how it's parsed out where people can see it within their houses. The one thing I was just going to say is that we might want a different color scheme because the red, green colorblind issue, those are usually the two color combinations you don't want to have in printing if you're distinguishing things. But otherwise, there's really great content in here. I think you guys did a great job.
Thank you, Jen. I'm not sure who we would ask to improve the color scheme, but I certainly take the point about color blindness. Other comments from the committee? Gary?
I think it's a great job as well, and congratulations. It's so simple to understand for someone to look at quickly. They don't have to study 15 to 20 pages to start getting some hints as to how to deal with this. So I congratulate all of the people that worked on this that did such a great job, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Other comments? Sarah?
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Gary. And I think part of the goal was maybe you don't do all these things, but also because there's sort of a theme as you read through them, you can kind of start to think about it wherever you live. And there's things that you can do as a homeowner, and then there's things you can do if you're a renter too, just, kind of thinking it through. I really take, Jen, your point about the red-green color blindness, and especially thinking too about how there's like the trees and some of the green mixes with the trees. So maybe just one suggestion would be the boxes that are green to make them like a shade of blue. And then the trees are fine to be green. And then the details inside, like the little curtains and things like that, are fine to be green. But maybe like just the information really being called out with another contrast. I don't know. Vince was our contact with Florencia, so I don't know if he had any comments from her that might help with that, or if you had any thoughts.
No, just make whatever edits you want, and I'll get Florencia to make them. I think Ian had his hand up.
Thanks.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ian, please go ahead.
So thank you, Sarah. I think it's really, I can't think of 2 pages that could encapsulate everything that homeowners face more. And regarding the color issue, anything but hunter orange, please.
But orange is so trendy right now, Ian. Okay, other comments from the committee members? So I think what we're looking for is a sense that the committee approves the brochure. We have a note about the color change and about adding the resilient Nantucket. Probably we want to get those done and bring this back. Sarah, is that what we think you would like to do with this? Or
I think if we can make those changes and then send it back to the group, maybe not to go over in a meeting, but for like a formal vote to put it out. I think it's important for everyone to agree before we put it out, since it'll have our stamp on it.
the other thing that we had talked about in the subcommittee meetings was having the Plus department review the brochure before it is published, so that if there are any suggestions that they have in terms of building code or local procedure, that those can be incorporated. So we don't want to inadvertently create conflicting information. So perhaps we can do both of those tasks before bringing it back. Holly, you have a comment on that?
Yes, Madam Chair, I just wanted to mention that I can work with Vince on distributing that with the Plus department, not a problem.
That would be very helpful, thank you. And then did someone else have a hand up? Jen?
Yes, thank you, Mary. I just wanted to say, maybe I see this second page as possibly being something really great to put on social media or an advertisement in the newspaper. I know brochures are great, but we're also kind of in a non-touching world lately. And so being able to prep this for digital distribution, and on that end, I think maybe we should also have the contact information and the Coastal Resiliency logo on this page, if possible, so that it could potentially stand alone.
That sounds like a great suggestion. I think we can squeeze it in there. Was there another hand I just missed? Sorry, I looked away for a second. Peter, yes.
I don't know if this is appropriate for this brochure, but maybe you should mention the app that Arcadis is creating, so people know about that, so they don't have to go to the link and find it and then may never find it. It just seemed like the app would be very helpful. in helping Arcadis and helping us.
We haven't mentioned the coastal resilience plan in this brochure. Am I right on that, Sarah?
That's correct.
Okay.
At the time of creating this, you know, we hadn't, the RFP hadn't even put out yet. I would sort of respectfully disagree. I think that the focus of this is homes, whether you own a home or renting a home. And the app, I think, is very useful and exciting, but it's less about the home and more about the location. And I think it brings up a lot more we'll have to explain. Any of the information that would, like all the things that are coming out of our committee are going to be available on the town website. I mean, that's just my opinion. I'd like to hear what others have to say as well.
Yeah, we do have the link to Resilient Nantucket on the first page, and that is the gateway to all of the other information. I would say that this brochure certainly could continue to exist after the app is discontinued, and so I would hesitate to mention the app specifically here. Other comments from committee members? Okay, not seeing any. So if I have the list correctly, adding a link to Resilient Nantucket, changing some of the green to blue, putting our logo on the second page, those would be the physical changes. And then also Holly can coordinate a review by the Plus department. So those are our next steps. Was there anything else that somebody wanted to add? Okay, I will also allow public comment at this point. Certainly, you know, many heads can come up with good ideas. If there's a member of the public who saw this posted with our agenda and wants to offer a suggestion or a comment, please feel free to go ahead right now. Again, you can unmute yourself with a comment or send a message through the chat to let us know that you'd like to make a comment. And I'm not seeing any. So thank you. I think we have the next steps and look forward to getting those done and bringing it back for a final sign off by the committee. All right. Next item on our agenda, Peter Morrison, the co-president of the Nantucket Civic League, is here to give us a brief recap of the event that the Civic League organized on February 6th, which was entitled Managing Water as Sea Levels Rise. There is a link to that recording in the, well, there's a link to the Civic League's webpage, which will have a link to the recording once it's available that in our agenda for the public if they did not get to attend the event. Peter, would you go ahead with a brief recap?
Sure. I'm delighted to give you a 2-minute recap on the Civic League's virtual forum that was held this past Saturday. And while I'm talking, Vince, this is my first time on screen share. I can't bring mine up, but if you check your email, there's a 1-pager. You put it up if you can get it. The forum was entitled Managing Water as Sea Levels Rise. And I wanted to emphasize, thank you, terrific, a couple of points, and particularly follow up with some synergies that I think occurred. First of all, we had 136 attendees. I know it wasn't as many as you all had at your meeting, but for us, that's a new record. And I attribute the record-breaking attendance to 4 factors. First of all, a topic that's on the forefront of public interest. Secondly, public thirst for details, certainly amplified by your meeting. Third was effective presenters. We had some really terrific presentations, and also the requisite mix of expertise. It just kind of all came together. And we got a number of compliments unsolicited. And I really think it was probably the best forum we've ever had. And I'm speaking from several years of experience. For your information, NCTV 18 recorded it and will further disseminate it. First of all, it's viewable on demand, so you can refer people to the link for it. You go on NCTV and they have the YouTube things I have the link to it, so I'll forward it to Mary so she can distribute it. And secondly, NCTV 18 is going to rebroadcast it periodically, and I encourage them to do so far into the future because this thing really has a long shelf life. What I wanted to emphasize was a fortuitous outcome, which is we have some really terrific standalone presentations for future use. And this is kind of a repertoire of 10-minute, 15-minute presentations that I think you all can use going forward. We have I thought I had a list of it here, but basically the future sea level rise, a terrific presentation that Vince made. Then we had Bill Greeter giving kind of nature's continual rearrangement of the Mattigit shoreline, which I think will go down in history as the best single 15-minute summary of what's going on there. We had an interesting presentation by Chuck Larson, and also a sense of how adaptive planning fits into this over the long term. We had a nice presentation by Jeff Carlson on protecting the wetlands, Thiers Fournier on preservation of water quality, and then we had a whole section that we called Moving Plans into Action, which was Vince and Trevor Johnson, the Arcadis representative. Finally, we have some links to the Worcester Polytech student team that did a separate study that kind of laid the foundation for some of what we have available. So we've got on the shelf a lot of good stuff to use, and I wanted to encourage you to make the most use of it. You can take the YouTube video that NCTV has, you can chop out 10-minute portions and use them going forward. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Peter. And I will echo that it came together really well. The presentations were you know, they just built one on top of the other. Excellent job by all the presenters, and thank you to the Civic League for organizing that. Do we have comments from committee members? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you, Peter, for that summary. We appreciate it, and we'll put the link once it's available in our minutes, if that's okay with everyone.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Next item on our agenda is I had spoken to Holly about an update on the certified local government, but we're probably going to remove that to a future date. The process is ongoing, and we'll have more information available in the future. And so we wanted to just bump that off for today. Is there any objection among the committee members to postponing that item? Yeah, not seeing any. Okay. We have public comments. So if there are members of the public that want to offer public comment at this time, we can recognize you and have you speak. Jane Pratt has a raised hand. Vince, not seeing her. There
yes,
she is.
I'm here.
Yes. Okay, go ahead, Jane. Thank you.
Thank you all for your efforts. And I made this comment. I've attended both the forum on Saturday and the previous one, the evening one. From somebody, I'm not new to Mattigit erosion, as I've been spending 30 years out there, but I am new to who's doing what, and it's somewhat difficult to keep track of who is doing what. And I just encourage you all to kind of, you know, whether it's the chamber or, and maybe you think you're connected, but I've been kind of seeing something pop up on somebody's Instagram, and I encourage you all to really saturate social media with this, especially if you want to get school kids and things like that. But you know, a coordinated, maybe, and I know the app, the Arcadis, but you know, it's like new names being thrown in, and who's doing what is just not clear. So, you know, some type of linking of you all would be quite helpful. And I just want to comment that I agree with Matt P, what he said before about specific plans. In our breakout session in the evening program, we did specifically discuss something that might be a project that might go forward in Mattocket, which was extremely helpful and I think motivated a few people. But whether it's the Mattocket Conservation Association or the Civic League or the, it's really hard to keep track unless you're paying attention, which I'm trying to do. So again, my suggestion is try to coordinate, try to have some place where everything is, and make that well known to the public.
Thank you, Jane. The challenge of social media is that we can put it out there, but there's no guarantee that people see it. We definitely did try to blanket the January 28th event among many groups and many outlets, including social media. And I think that's evidenced by the turnout.
Yeah, you did a good job.
But it's certainly a challenge. Yeah,
I'm just saying continue it. You did a good job. And
absolutely.
That's the only way I saw it, but continue.
And so I wanted to point out, we can only use the methods at our disposal. And so one of the things that we are doing is on our agendas, which are published every 2 weeks, we are including those event announcements from other entities to help the public understand who is doing what. It's kind of exactly what we're trying to do. And Acclimate with their site is also trying to coordinate announcements of all the groups that are doing things. There is a tremendous amount going on. The Civic League also, brought together several groups. So I think that's, I think, Jane, you're right on the money. We are trying to keep the public informed about who is doing what. Vince, you have a hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mary. Jane brings up an extremely good point. I've been trying to find it furiously and unfortunately haven't. There are 3 active projects on the go at the moment, and myself, Holly, Chuck, and some people from Remain who are doing another project tried to put together a one-pager that was going to go on the town website and get emailed out through Acclimate and just basically be put out there so that we could have something to be able to give to people who are in Jane's position, and sometimes me, to say, look, this is how it's all structured. This is, we're all working on the same thing that has resilience in the title, but they're 3 different projects. And just to give a super duper quick overview, I'm not going to share this because this is an early draft and I'm not working off something that's accurate enough. I'm trying to find the right document and it didn't. So the one that's been going on the longest is Resilient Nantucket Designs for Adaptation. That is the MVP grant that Holly is now leading. It's the one that the consultants on that are the Craig Group and Thompson and Associates. They are looking at mainly adaptation for historic buildings and people who own historic buildings. If Holly wants, she can give a much better update on that. Just give me 1 second, Holly. Then the other 2 are the one that I'm working on with this committee, the Coast Resilience Plan. That's all island, and the consultants on that are Arcadis. That's where that name comes in. The third one is Envision Resilience Nantucket. That's the one that's being done through Remain. That has its own private funding. It's got its own goals. It's a design challenge of sorts with 5 different universities. It's going to be pretty much take up the rest of this year. Claire Martin is the coordinator on that project for Remain. The bulk of the work is going to take place in this semester. They've already undertaken it. They have had a questionnaire out already. They've got the 5 universities are starting work on their project. I think that's due for delivery for effectively something comparable enough to their final exams in May. There's going to be presentations at that point. I'm working with Claire so that we can not have overlapping events, overlapping dates, that kind of thing. They're the 3 highlights, and there's probably other things that are probably in the pipeline, but they're the 3 at the moment. Holly, did you want to say a quick bit about Resilient Nantucket?
Well, thanks, Vince. I think you summed it up really well. We're trying to make sure that there's no confusion because we understand that there was confusion, even with some of our chairs, with some of the town's commissions and boards. So can completely understand for the public's perspective of what goes with what. And I think that's why you see that joint collaboration between all the different efforts and being disseminated through this body, as well as Acclimate, as well as other folks like the Civic League. So we appreciate that. But we are working on that, like Vince said, to get that information out so people do understand how all these different resilient projects are linked, but also what they each represent and who's actually working on them. So that's it. Other than that, thanks, Vince. I appreciate it.
And I'll add that, Vince's title is Coastal Resilience Coordinator, and he is at the hub of all of these efforts. And certainly anybody who is not coordinating with Vince is encouraged to do so. He's the one who has the finger in every pie, if you will. Okay, are there other members of the public that want to offer comment at this time? Okay, I am not seeing any other hands up. The next item on our agenda is discussion of updating upcoming meeting dates and topics. First, this is just every now and then asking members of the committee to offer suggestions for anything that they wish to have covered. Also, I've been advised that under this agenda item, we can add new business. And I want to briefly introduce a topic, make a small statement. As we mentioned previously, the select board has an agenda item for tomorrow night's meeting, which the question I think for the committee is this something that affects the Coastal Resilience Plan? And do we have comments on that? I want to stress that we should stay within our scope as a committee. So dissecting elements of the contract proposal or opening up other avenues of debate is probably not something we should address without having that as an agenda item, at least. So the question is really, do we think this affects the Coastal Resilience Plan? Is this something that the committee wants to discuss at a future time? I will also note that there are certainly committee members who have other connections to this contract. And just to keep in mind the potential for, I don't know if conflict of interest would be the right term, but anything that you want to preface your remarks to say what your connection to this agenda item might be would be appreciated. And I will start by saying that I had filed a disclosure form back over a year ago that I have an old connection to the SBPF project. Again, I don't believe that we should be discussing the SBPF in the context of this agenda item, but I wanted to make sure that that disclosure was known. So do we have comments from the committee on that topic? Peter?
Yeah, some of you guys know that I'm a member of the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy. I'm the environmental writer, so when directed to do so, I will write reports for that group, which are disseminated on social media and to an email group. And I just want to say that we should probably discuss this within the bounds of our mission. We should definitely have it as an item on the next agenda. That's it.
Thank you, Peter. Other comments from members of the committee? Gary and then Matt.
So Mary, are you saying that we should not even address the principle of what is being presented tomorrow to the select board, but merely instead put this on a future agenda? Because if the select board is going to be reviewing something tomorrow, and it's something that some of us on the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Commission believes should be something that we have an opinion on as to whether or not special studies ought to or not to be approved. wouldn't it be better for us to get the views of members of this commission now, of our committee now, prior to the time that the select board looks at it? Because wouldn't it be helpful for them to know that several of us, or none of us, one of us, maybe all of us, right? Whatever the view is, that people have some concerns about having the consultant that we are using taking on a specific study that some of us may have assumed would be part of our undertaking.
I don't know if I have an answer for that, Gary. Let's go to Matt. Matt did agree to present more information about this contract to us as a committee, speaking as a member of the select board. Matt, is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay,
No,
thank you.
If you want to sort of blame somebody, you can blame me if in a way. I've been talking with Coastal Conservancy members. I've been talking to SBPF. I've been representing the town, trying to figure out what is the best way to move forward. And one of the things that kept coming up all along was, how do we take a longer term view? How do we look at phasing this? How do we look at other options? When are we going to do that? And so this came out of those, hearing that from, continually from the Concom, from Coastal Conservancy, from our own committee. And at the same time, the select board is dealing with, an ongoing issue that has been happening for 20 years. So early on, I said, geez, can we just push up the date on this? And Arcadis couldn't do that and said, no, we really don't want to. We do it in this format. So some of the discussions, the select board, you guys attended some of it. Select board and Concom met recently, had a lot of discussions trying to get input on what might be possible and what might be a good way to move forward. And again, it was clear that we need to have a longer term vision and overall, can we phase it? Is there a vision that we can look at? So that is what this is, an attempt to do that, and do that potentially, or not even potentially, do that in a bit more depth, because we know it's necessary there. It is endangered. If Baxter Road lost as much as the South Shore lost, we'd be in a big mess right now. If we had that happen on this past storm, we'd be in a huge mess. We'd be spending $6 to $10 million to move the road immediately. I don't know how we would get it done in time for summer. It would be a mess. So, we're saying, what is the right way to proceed there? And this is an attempt to do that. And it should not and will not affect, coastal resiliency. My understanding, and Vince can clarify, it will not impact this committee. It will not impact, it might actually help us. It may save us money by having them working on this. They already have the details. They have the information, rather than go out and get someone outside. It will be it'll conform with the coastal resiliency. It's going to be the same people giving the same options. And I think it's, there's a lot of positives that will come out of doing this. And the positive for the select board is maybe we can unstick a situation that has been very politicized, particularly for the last 5 to 10 years. It's been very politicized. Nothing is good enough. People say we want X, Y, and Z. And we say, okay, let's do that. Oh, we don't want that. So how are we going to, so I look at it as, how are we going to come together as a community? And maybe I'm being naive to think that that's possible. Maybe there's, something underlying, but I'd like to think that there's a, with public input and with a process, maybe there's a way to phase this and do something that's good for the community. And so that was the goal of it. It wasn't to undercut anybody. This wasn't Coastal Conservancy telling us to do it. This wasn't SBPF telling us to do it. This is this was driven by sort of select board, mainly me, and saying, what can we do? How can we move this forward in a timely manner, in a way that will benefit the island? And that's the short version of what I think. There's been some questions. Mary's asked a bunch of questions, which Libby has answered in depth, and some of that we could talk about later. But I think this isn't to benefit any one party. This is really to take that long-term, long-term view, long-term vision, and see what our options are for that particular area. And if you have questions for Vince or I, that might be a better way to do this. I didn't prepare anything. It wasn't, I didn't,
Sarah had her hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't party, or I didn't watch the select board meeting where this was discussed, so I might just be behind. But one of the questions that I had very generally was about, I know that SBPF and the Sconset Bluff has been a politicized issue, or Indian erosion issue for a long time. But there are a lot of other areas too that are in immediate need of assistance. Brant Point, for example, Gary doesn't have to, we're there all the time. Sheep Pond Road, obviously, like Matticat, where they're losing homes. So I guess I'm wondering why the town resources are being put to this particular area right now. And I'm curious about that, decision to move forward with that when we have Arcadis to make a comprehensive plan, and why other areas that are also in imminent emergency need of assistance aren't being helped in that same way.
Well, first,
Matt, yeah.
I take issue with there not being helped. We've got, town staff has pivoted this past week and is spending tens of hours on Sheep's Pond. There's a lot that has to happen. It's weeks of work that that was not expected and is happening. We're going to town meeting with a $3.5–4 million override to improve the Jetties Beach pump, and we've expended tens of thousands of dollars designing the pump and upgrading the pump and the storm walls and everything else down there. So I think the town is working on those areas. Why is Baxter Road here? Partly it's here because we are have town infrastructure that is endangered, that the town does not have the immediate funding for, does not have the immediate plans for, and is in litigation and potential litigation. So there's some issues, with a different couple sides of this, looking at it completely differently. You've got two sides of this. One that would like to see this remain or be removed immediately, and another side that thinks it should stay there and it's the answer to everything. And so somewhere in between is really probably the answer. And so we're trying to find what's a reasonable way in between. So.
Vince, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, Matt covered it all extremely well. I have little bits to add along the way. If you look at Sheep Pond Road, we lost that road. It was a catastrophic failure. Now people don't have access. So there's going to be, because of that, a fundamental change to a part of the Coastal Resilience Plan and how that's going to develop over time. The risk assessment is now going to be very different. They're going to have to wait to figure out where the new access point is going to be and then work out what's the risk to that new access point. Hopefully we can have the answers to the Sheep Pond Road people quickly and to Arcadis. So there's one fundamental change that's happened to the CRP as it's been in process. The thing is, this developing plan for Baxter Road is in kind of a similar situation. We don't want to have to get to the point of a catastrophic failure. And that's kind of one of Matt's points, is the long-term planning, to have the engineering ideas in place. And then also you have to understand that the brief exceeds what has been in the Coastal Resilience Plan, say, for any part of the island. So the Coastal Resilience Plan, once delivered, will give concepts of what to do for certain locations, and they'll only be short designs, 10–20%, something to that effect. The Baxter Road would have a much higher level of engineering. So that's another point that's we could really do with sooner rather than later. It is a minor change to the CRP potentially, but contracts are sometimes subject to change, I suppose, is probably one of the easier ways to put it.
Jen? And I'm sorry, Peter, you did have your hand up, and then Jen and then Ian.
Okay. I don't doubt anything that Vince is saying. I understand what Matt's saying. I think everyone on this call, pretty much everyone at this meeting, knows that the SBPF project was going on before the CRP and crack was ever conceived. So the town right now is responding to something that was already in motion. They're trying to solve something that before the needs of Brant Point area and Mattocket were made known in a formal way like we have here. So I get that. It's just the public perception. We've got this momentum. You know, we had 130 people at the Civic League Forum. We had 167 people at the open house. We had 227 people or whatever that signed up, and they're listening to us. They're buying in, and I hear that we're out there at Sheep Pond Road trying to solve that. I personally think that that you're going to see the effects of sea level rise more quickly and more catastrophically on Brant Point than you will see at Baxter Road. I'm just saying the public perception, and the person that isn't sitting in on this Zoom call or doesn't know much but wants to is going to break it down in simple terms. Why are you putting all this money into this one area and not the other areas? Not knowing what they know, what Matt just said about Sheep Pond and Brant Point. That's all. We don't want to lose our momentum. So we should find a way to get the word out. I mean, I guess I'm talking to you, Brian Bouchard. You should put in your story, this is what's going on and why. People need to know it so we don't lose momentum, lose support.
Thank you, Peter. Jen was next. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. This has been a really interesting conversation with thinking about how we're going to move forward with the CRP once it's in place. And it is almost does seem like putting the cart before the horse, but I do see when we come with the CRP plan all together, I think this kind of action is most likely what we're going to see coming out of the plan when it's finished. So we're going to see, you know, recommendations for particular areas, and then we're going to see those homeowner groups and or the town saying, okay, now we need to take the next step and do a detailed, you know, feasibility engineering plan on this site and these solutions, and with the community members to decide, you know, which solution we're going to pick and how we're going to implement it. You know, I do think that, you know, SBPF is coming forward, or excuse me, Baxter Road is coming forward sooner, you know, as an issue because of the long-term history. And I don't have the RFP for what this scope of work is. I didn't read it through to know exactly what's being asked. But I do know that there has been a charged push towards the town to get an alternative access feasibility study done for a long time. So this seems to be feeding into that, hopefully. And I guess my comment then connects with what Pete is saying. I think we have to be really aware of how we, the CRAC committee, and also the town is talking about why this project has, you know, priority over all of the other projects. And I think if we look at it as a test case for how we would eventually implement the objectives that are put forward from the CRP in particular areas, because we know so much about Baxter Road already, we can move forward even before the CRP is done. But I do think it is something that should be, you know, we are considered as one of the stakeholders in the scope of work, and it is something that should be discussed within CRAC as that eventual implementation of the CRP.
Thank you, Jen and Ian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So regarding Matt's point about how politicized it's become and the litigation, I would like to emphasize as a vice chair of CONCOM, as the CONCOM's representative here, that the litigation is about the decision that CONCOM made that was strictly on environmental grounds. So regarding the politicization, I don't know if my fellow commissioners are aware that the lawsuit at Superior Court has been postponed because SBPF wants to introduce additional information. And also that the select board is having another session, executive session tomorrow about this, about the SBPF Concom standoff. And they haven't invited the chair of Concom as of yesterday evening, Ashley Arisman, which I have to say that I find disturbing and surprising.
Ian, I appreciate the update from the Concom. You are our representative there. I want to make sure that we stay within our scope. And I don't know that that extends to discussing how the select board is running their executive session, but thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other comments from committee members? So I will say that my comment is that I wish that this had been pursued as an extension of the Coastal Resilience Plan, and that the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee had been included in the process of developing this contract. I'm disappointed that our advice was not needed.
Can I speak to that, Mary?
Yes, thank you, Matt.
No, I think I think words matter. I'm stealing Deanne's line, and I think how this is being portrayed is it in some ways isn't fair. The coastal resiliency is a stakeholder, is going to be is written in and is going to be included and is going to be consulted. So and I think some of the we're talking of this like priority, giving Baxter Road priority. That isn't the the intention. So those are just two I've listened to some of it, and I think how we as a community present these topics about each other and to each other is really important. And I think if the assumption right from the beginning is that the other side is wrong, and that that there is another side, and B, that they're wrong, and that there's something nefarious going on, then it's going to be very difficult to come together, and especially difficult if we have to do something that one or the other side of one of these neighborhoods doesn't like. If we're always looking for what went wrong instead of looking for maybe what can we do right and how can we come together, I think we're going to have a very difficult time. Jen is completely right about sort of Baxter Road area is a little further along. It's got data from 20 years, and it's been on the forefront, and so there is there may be things that happen there slightly earlier, would have happened slightly early anyway. So anyway, so I just think that's I just know the intent here is isn't to do the bidding of one side or the other, and or any of that kind of stuff. And I just think we need to take the emotion and the heat down a notch or two, and really try to look at what is the right way to move forward. How do we do a long-term look? How do if we're going to get to if we're going to look at other options, then we have to be able to actually talk about them without being without thinking that one person is out to get you. So I'm not putting that very well, but I hope that people will be open if this moves forward. This hasn't been discussed by the select board. It's moving forward. In regards to Ian's, we're having an update, Ian. If if the chair feels that Ashley is appropriate, then she will be asked. But we're getting an update because we don't know where it is. And so again, that isn't that wasn't to keep her out of the loop. So.
I saw that Sarah had her hand up. Ian, since Matt addressed you, if you want to respond, and then we'll go to Sarah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your clarification, Matt. And regarding the Arcadis, there will be public input, I hope, as well as all the stakeholders that they've mentioned. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, and to Sarah, please.
I just wanted to say, because I sort of brought up, the question in the beginning, it wasn't meant to necessarily criticize anyone. It's more thinking, as this Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee, we advise the select board, but also we represent the town and our community. And I think that I was thinking of what other people might ask. It is that perception, just as you said, Matt, like words matter. So also there is that perception. And so not everyone knows that, or might think of it in that long-term state. It might just be, so I'm just thinking like we need to talk about this openly, just because I think there is that perception of us, favoritism to certain neighborhoods. Not saying that that's the case, but I'm just saying that there is that sometimes that perception. And I think that it's making me think too of, as we move forward with helping with Arcadis with the consultants and the plan, really treating both. It's hard to have that balance between treating the neighborhoods equally and not just addressing the loudest voice in the room, but then addressing where the biggest issues are as well, right? So there's like that twofold. Sometimes the loudest voices aren't where the biggest immediate need is too. So I'm not saying that's the case with this. I'm just saying we have to be mindful of that too. And perception does matter. So thank you.
Gary?
Just to continue with what Sarah was saying, and I think Peter said it as well, I'm a little torn about this because I know we need to focus on so many areas, but I'm reminded of this last several meetings that we had that Bruce, I forgot his last name, from the Matticat Association. He showed up every time, and every time he asked to be put in front of the line, and every time we said everyone will be treated equally, and we're not putting any area in front of the line. And here, what are we doing now? It could be perceived we're spending $157,000 to put Sconset issues in front of the line. Personally, I think the $157,000 extra dollars on Arcadis should be spent saving downtown and not any other area, as if we had to choose one priority. But I'm just pointing out, there will be concern when people read and hear about this, that we're favoring one group over another. And that's the point I wanted to make.
Yes, Matt.
Yeah, Gary, the money that the money that is being expended there was part of, I think it was about 500,000 that was approved by town meeting a number of years ago, specifically for that area. So this was money that, so we aren't taking it away from anybody else. It's money that was already earmarked for Baxter Road, for some of this type of planning. And it's, and so we're fortunate it was there. We didn't have to go back to town meeting to do it. And it's a way to move this more quickly.
Thank you, Matt. And just for reference, I did look at the 2019 annual town meeting warrant, Article 10. There were two appropriations. One was the $550,000 for the Coastal Resilience Plan. And as Matt said, there was a second separate appropriation for costs relating to relocating Baxter Road. So thank you for clarifying where that money's coming from, Matt. Vince.
Thank you. So 157,000 for this plan is what's in the budget section. If another outside consultant were to come in and do this instead, they'd have to start from scratch. They'd have to do all the groundwork, all the legwork, collect an awful lot of background information. Arcadis have this background information, and they've got it in-house. They've already started some of the risk analysis, as I understand. That represents a saving. They have information that they don't have to go off and collect and reanalyze. They have to re-look at some of it in a different light now, because they're not just looking at a concept as such anymore for Baxter Road. They're looking at more qualified engineering solutions that can be applied. I don't want to put numbers to it, but it's safe to say that probably doubling it by starting with another company, it wouldn't be a far assumption.
Thank you, Vince. Peter?
It's not so much, for me, it's not so much the money. It's again, going back to the perception. The money's there, it's going to be spent. It's focused on that job. So whoever is going to do it is going to do it. It's the effort that's going to go into that, but not into Brant Point, not into Sheep Pond Road. And again, yes, we all know what's going on, but it's the public. It's how they're going to read it, how they're going to read Brian's story, how they're going to disseminate it on Facebook. It's that's important.
Thank you, Peter.
Well,
Matt?
Hopefully this has cleared some of that up. So what we're disseminating is, information that says it isn't going to impact coastal resilience. It's going to help coastal resiliency plan. It's going to help us going forward. It isn't impacting those other areas. They're being addressed. I hope that that's the message that comes out of our group at least, and that hopefully that's, hopefully we've answered questions and made that possible.
Thank you, Matt. Gary, did you have something to add?
Yes, I think what Matt said is right, and what we're all saying is correct. I just wish that this proposal to do this, spend this money that Matt has explained has already been budgeted and approved. I wish it had come, the suggestion had come under the auspices of our committee. And then people said, oh yes, the committee's doing it and look how clever they are. It's not that they're favoring one area. The town has put the money aside already, and the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Commission, which is looking at all the areas, is using this opportunity to do one of its priorities, one of the many areas that needs focusing on. That's just the concern, that it didn't come from us and it didn't come from our oversight. It came kind of sideways, and that's why there may be some misperception by the public. And Vince, by the way, I wouldn't change the person doing it at all. I certainly wouldn't want to not use the same contractor who had knowledge of it, but it's not that. It should have come from our committee in the first place, in at least my personal view. Thank you.
Peter, you had something to add, and then back to Matt.
Yeah, just what Matt said, it is clear. I think it's clear to all of us. It's what comes out of this out into the public. That's all. It's clear to me.
Matt?
Yeah, I think, no, geez, now I'm losing my thought. I had brought this, I know it is, I had brought this topic up a couple times in our meetings and it didn't gain traction. I should have pushed it harder. I should have explained it more and pushed it harder, and maybe it would have come from us, Gary, but I didn't. I just brought it up, and I understand the hesitancy of our group to not wade into this, because I've been stuck in the middle of this now for 10 years. I understand the hesitancy for maybe not wanting to, to do this. But the town, in my role as a select board member, in the administration of the select board, we have to look at the, the immediacy. If we turn it another way, if Sheep Pond Road right now, if we just said, you know what, we can't do anything out there right now because we have to wait for this process to go through. We couldn't do that. And so we're in sort of a similar situation, as the select board, where we are now, and the administration is in that situation. It doesn't seem like that. It's not as obvious as, the road is half in the water, but it's similar. And so that's why we're doing it. It's not to benefit anybody. It's not to hurt anybody. It's to try to, I sort of said this from the beginning, it's to try to thread the needle on this and find a way forward that works. So.
Thank you, Matt. Jen?
Thank you, Mary. I just want to say I agree a lot with what Gary had said, that it would have been nice if this had come through the committee. And I know, Matt, you brought up that you have been working with the Concom on the issue, but I don't think that the committee was entirely aware that we were going to go with a consultant to come up with alternative analysis. I think as the CRAC committee, we might have had some input on what we wanted to see from an alternative analysis for access and coastal resiliency issues out there. And I think that's where our input would have been valuable at the beginning of the process, and then, you know, input on what we wanted the consultants to give us at the end. I mean, just reading through this, and again, I hadn't seen what the RFP was, so I don't know what we asked the consultants to do. I like what their scope of work looks like, and I think that will again be useful for other projects that we're seeing in the future. But I just think as far as our effectiveness of working with the CRP, being part of that conversation will be helpful. And I don't know where we move forward with this now. I don't know if the select board is actually approving this scope of work tomorrow night, or if we have a chance to actually read it a little thoroughly and give input on things we would want to see in here. So I don't know what the timeline is on this right now.
Matt, if you want to address that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think we may approve it tomorrow night. I'm not sure. This will be the first time that we as a board have been able to discuss it. And, you know, because we haven't met. And this came to us not last Friday, but the Friday before. So this was, and we were going to discuss it last week. And we were asked to put it off a week so people could comment. So, you know, so it was put off. Dawn has put it off till this week so that Coastal Conservancy had a chance to comment. And so we, you know, so we are taking public comment. And I do think that this committee has influenced Arcadis already. You know, they know, so we're hiring the same people that we've already influenced in how we, you know, and they know sort of, you know, what we'd like, what the direction we're trying to take as a community. I think that's going to be one of the positives of this. You know, so I'm not as concerned about, you know, sort of nitpicking that part of it. I think, you know, and so anyway, and hopefully that, you know, what they're asked to do is look at this thing, you know, over short, medium, long term, and what are the options, and, you know, and it's not, we're not just picking we're not picking the solution. We're saying what, you know, what is going to happen? How do we do it? You know, and I think, you know, I trust, from what I understand of this group, I trust that they'll do a good job with it.
Thank you, Matt. Vince.
Thank you, Mary. It's also worth pointing out, it seems that some people didn't get a chance to go over the scope or go over all of it to enough to understand its content. So it's just kind of worth pointing out that there's a list of stakeholders, and CRAC is included as a stakeholder. So as a stakeholder and giving comment on this as the process moves on, that's one way to see how it's going to progress and for CRAC to give its input. But is there another question to be asked that once the select board has made a decision, either this Wednesday or another Wednesday, whenever it might be, that we could at that point have it on the agenda for a discussion again and understand how, once everyone's had a chance to read the scope and understand how the project is actually going to work?
Yeah, I think it certainly will come back to us in some form. So any further comments from the committee? So as Matt said, they will be taking public comment at the select board meeting tomorrow night. Because this was not originally on our agenda, and because the information that was submitted by me was really more to the select board, we were given a copy of the Coastal Conservancy's, I shouldn't say we, I was forwarded a copy of the Coastal Conservancy's statement, which was also included in the packet for February 10th at the select board. And then just before the meeting, we received further comments from Ian Golding. So we have those additional documents which we can bring back to a future meeting when they are able to be reviewed by everybody and discussed. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody on the committee. Vince, did you want to comment on that?
No, Deanne has her hand raised.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you. Okay, so Again, a reminder that the scope of this committee is advisory and generally limited to the Coastal Resilience Plan. Deanne, I do see that you have your hand up, and I would like to recognize you to speak within that context. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you to all of you for discussing this issue. We couldn't agree more that your input would have been invaluable. And I have just 4 quick points of information. We are all looking, I think we're in agreement that we want transparency in our government. We saw this contract listed on the February 3rd Select Board meeting in a list of 7 professional agreements to be approved by the town manager if the Select Board did not object. The Arcadis proposed scope of work was not in the packet. And Matt is absolutely right. We contacted the board chair and she got us a copy of the proposal. And after we read it, we asked her if she would defer action for a week so that the public could read it and understand it and comment. And she graciously agreed to do that. But Sarah, you apologize for missing the discussion. There's been no discussion of this proposed contract. And that just doesn't seem to us to be consistent with what we want in our government or we want in our coastal resiliency planning process. We need transparency, we need objectivity, and we need fairness. And that's not how we've gotten here to this point. The second thing is that Matt is absolutely right. Town meeting has appropriated money for Baxter Road. In annual town meeting in 2015, $500,000 was appropriated for a specific purpose, and the purpose was to relocate Baxter Road. At annual town meeting in 2019, town meeting allocated another $500,000. And that's right, that was for Baxter Road, but it was for relocating Baxter Road. In 2019, town meeting also allocated $550,000 for resiliency planning. And we're assuming that that's the money that is underwriting the current Arcadis contract that was awarded for about $550,000. The third point is that this is not just an engineering study as we understand it. When we read this proposal, we have a lot of questions, but it's also going to consider bluff stabilization, nourishment, retreat, no action. And I just want to say for almost 10 years, the Conservation Commission has spent hundreds, if not thousands.
Deanne, I'm sorry to interrupt. Within the scope of this committee, I appreciate that your remarks are well-intentioned, but discussing the work of the Conservation Commission and the work of the Select Board is probably outside of our scope.
Mary,
that's appropriate.
Mary, this is just background information.
It would be appropriate to present that at the Select Board meeting. And again, I apologize if I am overstepping, but I think that it's important that we limit this to the capability of this committee.
Okay, it just doesn't feel welcoming, Mary.
I completely understand.
Thank you. And my fourth and final point is that when we saw this contract and we studied it and we researched it, we went back to the Arcadis proposal. And I think that this is very relevant to this committee. The original Arcadis proposal, as you remember, was reviewed by an internal review committee. And the proposal was about 187 pages. We have a copy of that proposal in our file because we filed a request for documents. We hadn't read through the proposal closely because the contract had been already awarded. So we've been spending the past week doing research, and we went back to that proposal, and we are very concerned, and we want to bring it to your attention that the lead engineer for the Arcadis technical design team formerly worked for SBPF and in fact was the project manager for the geotubes. And we think this constitutes a conflict of interest, or certainly the perception of a conflict of interest, that should be disclosed and discussed so that the public has credibility in the process. And that concludes my comment.
Thank you, Deanne. Matt, is there anything that you wanted to respond to, or
I don't
as a select board member?
I should. His background was disclosed in the original contract. It was disclosed in this one. We knew that. There's an advantage to that. You start with someone who knows the existing and why and whether, and then he's going to take, and Dan's right, he's going to look at not just that, are there other options, are there other ways to do it, including retreat? Is there going to be a point where this doesn't work? I think so we're not starting with we're not starting saying we want something. We're starting with what's the right way to do it. It's interesting that, we want to have a public hearing. This basically how I look at this, what we're trying to do is we're trying to have in place a process to allow the public input that is necessary to get to a result for the coastal resiliency plan and for the Baxter Road long-term plan. So sort of saying that we're not having a public, so I get, my mind gets a little frazzled because I'm like, wait a minute, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put in place the funding and the process to have the open discussion about this and include the stakeholders. That is what our goal is. It isn't to hide this. And so I just think that's, and again, how we present it, if it's presented as, oh, look, you're doing something wrong, you're trying to hide it from us, you don't want our input, that isn't the intent, that isn't what we're trying to do. So, and it is including relocating Baxter Road. It is including looking at those issues. So I think that this is a step in the right direction, and, and we could nitpick it and try to find all the little things that are wrong, to delay it or to not do this. But I think that's a mistake for a lot of reasons.
Thank you, Matt. I think that was very helpful to say that we are, or I'm sorry, again, shouldn't say we, that the select board with awarding this contract wants to begin the public process. The proposal does include significant number of public input meetings. I think that's a very good note to end on, if the rest of the committee will allow that. And I appreciate everybody taking a look at that on short notice.
Madam Chair, can I ask one quick question?
Yes, Sarah.
So this is just about those public engagement. I just want to, have us all think moving forward, including the select board, that having Arcadis do public outreach about SBP or the Baxter Road project, as well as doing the public outreach about the coastal resiliency plan. I'm just curious moving forward how that's going to go. Is there going to be confusion? Obviously, there's shared information that will be useful across all aspects, but I wouldn't want someone who wants to have input on the coastal resiliency plan to think they're attending one of those information sessions when it's specific to Baxter Road. Just putting it out there as being aware ahead of time, since it's a lot of the same. It's the same players.
To the point that was made earlier, letting people know who's doing what is going to be very necessary as we try and do our best on each of these initiatives. So the final item on the agenda is committee reports. If there are members who have updates from their representative committees and want to offer them. Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought my fellow CRAC members would be interested that both the DPW and the Land Bank have applications before us to have an exemption from the normal application process for routine maintenance. And so there's a discussion going on right now as to what routine maintenance would mean. And we've been meaning to update our regulations for quite some time, and we have seemed to be stalled before the sort of the final drive. And which I assume is because the Natural Resources Department is so busy with COVID. I mean, their responsibilities, Jeff Carlson's responsibilities far exceed just focused on Concom. And we're running into enforcement issues. We have, it's always been a problem, but now we have one egregious example in particular where we're being ignored, and we just can't go forward. So I don't know if other departments or other committees have been having this issue. I just thought I'd bring that up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Other members of the, other representatives of committees that have updates for this committee? Okay, if there are no further comments, we can take a motion to adjourn.
Gary wants to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gary, if I missed you.
I just thought I'd mention something. You know, our committee has focused on something that we're thinking about for the future. I don't know if it'll affect this committee as well, but one of the issues that the advisory committee for non-voting taxpayers has is that most of us are not here for much of the off season, and therefore we can't have our meetings. With the COVID, we are able to meet electronically, and so we've had meetings every couple of weeks on lots of issues. So one of the things our committee is trying to figure out, and we spoke to John Brescia from the Town Government Study Committee recently, to see whether or not there's a way we can create some legislative change or change that would allow committees like ours to continue meeting electronically after the COVID restrictions are gone. As you know, we are, and I'm permitted to come to the meetings electronically by telephone. We didn't have Zoom in those days when we started our committee, but you remember my vote never counted on for quorum purposes, so we couldn't take official action. For the seasonal committee like ours, it's really important that we would have that opportunity. And so I just thought I'd mention it. It's not quite as important to this committee, but it's something we're trying to figure out a solution for. Hopefully, once the COVID restrictions are gone and we can go back to good old-fashioned meetings, sitting around a room and enjoying at each other. That's just my report, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Gary. Matt, you might have some updates for Gary.
I'm not sure I have updates on that. I will say that if it wasn't for the, the off-island guys, we would have paved Main Street. I don't know if everyone knows that story, but if it wasn't for, the second homeowners, Main Street would be tar. So we should be listening to you guys, Gary. The other thing, PFAS is an issue, as everyone knows, in the town. We will be looking, we're putting out RFP, putting out a study to analyze, what is the impact at the landfill? What are the impact at the other areas on the island? And and then we have to figure out what the possible solution is. And I'm just putting this out for people to think about. One of the solutions that we're, right away at the airport was run water to those properties. I think we may end up in the same situation in Mattakit where we're going to be running water, and then we're going to run water and sewer. And are we running water and sewer into an area that is potentially going to be sort of eroding and disappearing, how do you do that? You know, and how do you justify that amount of money? Those will be issues that we will probably want to be dealing with as, you know, as it goes forward. And and those are issues that should be sort of baked into whatever our resiliency plan is. So part of it is the more money you spend, you put a sunken cost, you know, $80,000 a building to run water or sewer. And then the next thing you know, you're far less likely, you know, you're going to build more in the area. You're going to be far less likely to be nimble and move houses around and move them away. So we have to just be thinking sort of long-term and big picture, I think, on those issues.
Matt, I'm going to assume that when you say we, you mean the town rather than specifically this committee.
Well, I think this committee, we as a town, we as
Yeah.
the big we, but I'm also thinking, you know, when we, this committee get back the, you know, sort of start getting back drafts or thinking about it, you know, we want to be thinking about those issues, you know, so sort of.
And I think that's why the committee decided last year to recommend that all the town's projects consider sea level rise as a factor. Ian, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did you say sunken cost, Matt? Because I would say you get my vote for the best pun of the week. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian.
I wish it was on purpose. You're giving me way too much credit.
Okay, if there are no other comments, someone can make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jen. So by roll call vote, Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Peter Brace,
Aye.
Graham Durovich,
Bye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Ian Golding,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Fritz McClure,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre. Aye. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mary. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.